Welcome to our deep dive.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to be taking a look at the Rural Development Report for 2021.
Yeah.
And I know you're really interested in how we can make food systems work better for everyone,
Absolutely.
farmers, consumers, and the planet.
Yeah.
Well, this report dives right into that.
Yeah. Definitely a lot to unpack there for sure.
So this report lays out these three big, dimensions of food systems.
Right.
Health inclusion and sustainability.
Yeah.
But before we jump into those,
Yeah.
can you give us a quick snapshot of what in this report did you find most surprising or unexpected?
Oh, wow.
What really jumped out at you?
One of the things that is really striking is just the sheer scale of food loss and waste.
Yeah.
A third of all food produced globally never makes it to our plates.
Wow.
And that's just a mind-boggling amount of resources, land, water, energy. A third,
It's going to waste.
that's a much bigger number than I would have guessed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a huge problem. Yeah, it
Yeah.
really makes you think about where our food comes from and what happens along the way.
Right, and the report breaks down this waste, showing that it happens at every stage of the food system,
Okay.
from production and storage.
So it's not just consumers throwing away leftovers.
No, not at all.
It's a much bigger systemic issue.
Exactly. It really highlights the need for a more holistic, integrated approach to food systems.
Okay.
You can't just address waste in isolation.
Right.
You really need to look at all the interconnected elements.
Okay, so let's unpack those elements.
Okay.
You mentioned the report focuses on health, inclusion, and sustainability.
Uh-huh.
Can we start with inclusion?
Sure.
What does it actually mean, like in the context of food systems?
Inclusion is all about ensuring that everyone has access to affordable, nutritious food,
Okay.
regardless of their income or their location or their social status.
So like food security.
Yeah, and it's not just about consumers, it's also about making sure that the people who produce our food,
Right, the farmers.
the farmers, the farm workers, everyone involved in the food chain can earn a decent living
Uh-huh.
and work in safe and equitable conditions.
So it's about fairness
Exactly.
and equity throughout the entire system.
Throughout the whole system, yeah.
But the report also points out that, there are often trade-offs
Right.
between these dimensions.
Yeah.
How does that play out in terms of inclusion?
Well, for example, making food as cheap as possible for consumers might mean squeezing farmers and paying them unfairly low prices for their products.
Oh, I see.
Or it might involve cutting corners on worker safety
Oh, wow.
or environmental protection.
To keep costs down.
Yeah, to reduce production costs, exactly.
It's a balancing act.
It is a balancing act.
Finding ways to make food accessible and affordable,
Right.
while also ensuring fairness for producers and protecting the environment.
Absolutely. And the report argues that, we need to kind of shift our focus from simply producing more food to producing it better
Okay.
in ways that are both inclusive and sustainable.
This brings to mind like the local farmers market in my neighborhood,
Okay.
which is great because you can buy directly from the producers,
Yeah.
but their prices are noticeably higher than the supermarket.
Right.
So I guess that illustrates the trade-offs you're talking about.
It does, and it raises the question about how to make those more sustainable and equitable options accessible to everyone.
Yeah, not just those who can afford to pay a premium.
Exactly.
The report also talks about this interesting concept of the hidden middle of the food system.
Right.
What is that?
So the midstream, as the report calls it, refers to all the businesses and activities that connect food producers to consumers.
Okay.
So this includes things like processing, packaging, transporting, and selling food.
I see.
It's that often invisible web that gets food from the farm to our tables.
And why is it hidden?
It's hidden because it's often overlooked in discussions about food systems.
Right.
We tend to focus on the farms and the consumers,
Uh-huh.
but we forget about all those crucial steps in between.
And this midstream is largely made up of small and medium enterprises, right?
Exactly. These SMEs play a vital role in food systems, but they often face challenges like lack of access to financing infrastructure and training.
So if these businesses struggle,
Right.
what does that mean for the rest of the food system?
Well, it could mean higher food prices,
Okay.
less variety, and fewer opportunities for economic development in rural areas.
I see.
It can also lead to a more fragile food system that's vulnerable to disruptions.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
So supporting these SMEs is crucial for a resilient and equitable food system.
it is.
Now, another hot button issue when it comes to food is meat consumption.
Right.
The report tackles the debate surrounding animal-sourced foods head-on.
Yeah.
What are some of the key points raised?
Well, the report acknowledges the rising demand for animal products globally and the potential nutritional benefits they offer,
Oh, okay.
particularly in terms of protein and essential nutrients.
Yeah.
However, it also doesn't shy away from the environmental concerns.
But isn't the message always eat less meat?
You know what's refreshing about the report is its emphasis on the need for nuanced, context-specific analysis.
Okay.
It cautions against blanket pronouncements about animal-source foods.
Because
Because the impacts can vary dramatically depending on the production system, the type of animal, and the region.
So it's not as simple as saying meat is bad.
Exactly.
Or meat is good.
It's much more complicated than that.
That's much more complicated.
For example, the report highlights that despite the negative press surrounding meat consumption in many parts of Africa and Asia, particularly among lower-income populations, animal-source food consumption actually falls below recommended levels.
So in those contexts, increasing access to animal products
Right.
could actually improve nutrition and well-being.
Exactly. It's all about finding the right balance and promoting sustainable production practices that minimize environmental impact.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
The report also talks about circularity in animal production.
Yes.
Can you explain what that means?
So circularity is all about reducing waste and recycling resources within the system.
Okay.
It's a key principle of sustainability.
Hmm.
In the context of animal agriculture, it means finding ways to use waste products from other parts of the food system as feed for animals,
Oh, interesting.
and using animal manure as fertilizer.
So it's about creating like a closed loop
Exactly.
where waste is minimized
Yeah.
and resources are used more efficiently,
So efficiently, right?
and some animal production system
Like chicken and aquaculture.
can actually be quite sustainable when managed this way.
That's right.
So it's not just about reducing meat consumption across the board,
Right.
but also about making the systems we have more efficient and less wasteful.
That's a key takeaway, and it leads us to another important concept. The report highlights sustainable intensification.
All right, let's dive into that. What exactly is sustainable intensification, and how does it fit into this larger picture of making food systems more sustainable and equitable?
Okay, well, sustainable intensification is about producing more food from the same amount of land
Okay.
while minimizing environmental impact.
So not about expanding farmland,
Right.
but like making the land we have more productive.
Exactly. And the report emphasizes that this isn't about going back to traditional methods.
Okay.
It's about using knowledge and technology to optimize resource use and close what are called yield gaps.
Yield gaps? What are those?
A yield gap is the difference between the potential yield of a crop and the actual yield achieved in practice.
Oh.
So it represents the unrealized potential of our farmland.
I see.
Closing these gaps means finding ways to produce more food on the land we're already using without having to expand into new areas, which often leads to deforestation and habitat loss.
That makes sense. So how does technology play a role in sustainable intensification?
Yeah,
It seems like it could be a double-edged sword,
right.
potentially helpful, but also potentially leading to more intensive and harmful farming practices.
You're right. It's all about using technology wisely.
Right.
You know, it can help us use inputs like water and fertilizer more efficiently, develop crops that are more resistant to pests and diseases,
Okay.
and monitor crop health more effectively. So it's about using innovation to make agriculture smarter and more sustainable.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where technology enhances sustainability rather than undermining it.
Exactly. It's not about technology for technology's sake.
Right.
It's about using it to achieve specific sustainability goals.
And what does this mean for me? Like, how can I, as a consumer, support sustainable intensification?
Well, think about the impact your food choices have on farmers and the environment.
Okay.
Choosing products that are certified sustainable,
Uh-huh.
supporting local farmers who are using these practices, and even just being aware of the issues can make a difference.
Okay, so consumer choices can have an impact. Now, the report also talks about something called closing the nutrient loop. What is that all about?
Closing the nutrient loop is about creating a circular food system where waste is minimized and resources are used more efficiently.
So it's kind of like composting on a much larger scale.
Yes, exactly. It's about treating waste as a resource rather than a problem.
And the report mentions this NUT-HEMON approach. What is that?
NUT-HEMON stands for Nutrient Flows and Management.
Okay.
It's a framework that analyzes nutrient flows in farming systems to identify opportunities for closing the nutrient loop.
I I see.
It helps to pinpoint where nutrients are being lost or wasted,
Uh,
and then suggests ways to capture and reuse those nutrients.
so like doing an audit of your nutrient use
Exactly.
and then figuring out how to optimize it.
Precisely. It's about taking a systems approach to nutrient management,
Okay.
rather than just looking at individual inputs and outputs.
Now, we talked earlier about that shocking statistic that a third of all food produced globally goes to waste.
Right.
Can you break that down a bit further?
Sure.
What's the difference between food loss and food waste?
So food loss happens pre-retail,
Yeah.
during production, storage, and transportation. It's often due to factors like inadequate infrastructure, poor handling practices, and lack of access to markets.
So food that goes bad before it even reaches the supermarket.
Exactly. Food waste, on the other hand, happens at the retail and consumer levels.
Okay.
It's food that's discarded in supermarkets, restaurants, and our homes.
Oh, so perfectly edible food that just ends up in the trash.
Right, and it's a complex issue.
Yeah, I know I'm guilty of that sometimes.
We all are.
Yeah,
But there are things we can all do to reduce food waste in our own lives.
absolutely. Like being more mindful about our food purchases, storing food properly,
Right.
and getting creative with leftovers.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about trade.
Okay.
The report kind of delves into the complexities of trade
Yeah.
and its impact on food systems.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the key takeaways there?
Well, the report acknowledges that trade can play a positive role in food systems by boosting food availability and creating economic opportunities.
So it can help create like a more balanced global food system.
Right. But it also highlights the potential downsides of trade, especially in terms of vulnerability. For countries that are heavily reliant on food imports, disruptions to global markets can have a huge impact on food security.
That makes sense.
Hmm.
If something disrupts those trade flows, it could lead to shortages and price spikes,
Exactly.
making food less accessible, especially for vulnerable populations.
Exactly. And the report emphasizes the need to balance openness with resilience,
Okay.
finding ways to benefit from trade while also building in safeguards to protect food security.
So what kinds of safeguards are we talking about?
Well, for countries heavily reliant on imports, the report suggests strategies like diversifying food production,
Okay.
developing regional markets,
Uh-huh.
and strengthening social safety nets to cushion against price shocks.
So like creating multiple layers of security within the food system.
Right. Not putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Exactly.
Oh.
And it highlights the need for a more collaborative and coordinated approach to global food security, where countries work together to manage risks and ensure everyone has access to the food they need.
Yeah.
That brings us to another really important aspect of food systems,
Right.
the people who work within them.
Yeah.
The report places a strong emphasis on empowerment,
Yes.
particularly for women. Why is that so crucial?
Empowering women in food systems leads to a cascade of positive impacts.
Okay.
From improved nutrition and food security to increased household income and overall well-being.
That's great.
When women have more control over resources and decision-making, it benefits everyone.
But the report also highlights some pretty sobering statistics
Right.
about the inequalities that women face in agriculture.
Yes.
Could you share some of those?
Sure. One of the most striking statistics is the persistent wage gap in agriculture.
Okay.
Women often earn significantly less than men for the same work.
Wow, that's outrageous. What needs to change to address these inequalities?
Well, the report calls for increased investment in rural infrastructure,
Okay.
capacity building programs specifically for women, and policies that promote gender equality.
So creating a more level playing field and
Mhm.
providing women with the resources and opportunities they need to thrive in the agricultural sector.
Exactly.
What can I do to support these efforts?
Well, supporting organizations that empower women farmers,
Okay.
choosing to buy products from businesses that prioritize fair labor practices, and advocating for policies that promote gender equality are all great ways to make a difference.
Great suggestions.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about another aspect of food systems that often gets a bad rap. Food processing. There's so much negativity around processed food these days. Is it all bad?
Not necessarily. The report presents a more nuanced perspective on food processing.
Okay.
It acknowledges the negative perceptions, particularly around ultra-processed foods, or UPFs,
Okay.
which are often high in unhealthy ingredients and have been linked to health problems.
Yeah.
But it also highlights the potential benefits of food processing.
What kind of benefits?
Well, food processing can create jobs, empower entrepreneurs, and add value to local products.
Oh.
It can help preserve food, making it last longer and reducing waste.
Uh-huh.
And it can make food more convenient and accessible,
Right.
which is particularly important for people with busy lives or limited cooking facilities.
So there's a flip side to the coin. And the report specifically mentions that food processing can be a pathway to economic empowerment for women.
Absolutely. Women often play a significant role in food processing businesses, particularly at the small and medium enterprise level.
Okay.
So supporting these businesses can have a positive ripple effect on women's economic empowerment.
That's a great point. But we still need to be mindful of the health risks associated with UPFs.
Definitely.
Yeah.
The report emphasizes the importance of promoting responsible processing practices that ensure safety and moderate UPF intake.
So it's about choosing processed foods wisely
Exactly.
and being aware of the ingredients.
Right. And it's about supporting businesses that are using processing in a way that benefits both people and the planet.
That's a great point to wrap up this part of our discussion. We've covered so much ground, from sustainable intensification and closing the nutrient loop
Right.
to the role of trade and the importance of empowering women in food systems.
And we've seen that food processing, often demonized,
Yeah,
can actually play a positive role when done responsibly.
absolutely. But there's still one more fascinating aspect of the report we need to discuss. A powerful tool they use called Magnet.
Ah, yes, MAGNET. It stands for Model for Analysis of Global Nutrition Dynamics, Environmental Impacts and Transformations.
It's a mouthful, I know.
It is a mouthful.
But a very important mouthful, it seems. What exactly is Magnet and why is it so significant?
Well, MAGNET is basically a sophisticated computer model that allows researchers to kind of explore what might happen if we make different choices about our food systems.
Oh, okay, so it lets you game out different scenarios.
Exactly. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure for the future of food.
Wow, I like that.
So Magnet allows researchers to create these virtual scenarios.
Yeah.
Like what would happen if everyone shifted to a more plant-based diet?
Oh.
Or if we invested heavily in sustainable farming practices?
Right.
And then it analyzes the impact of those choices on things like nutrition,
Yeah.
the environment, and the economy.
So it's like a crystal ball for food systems,
It is.
letting us see the potential consequences of our actions.
Exactly.
That's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example of one of the scenarios they modeled using Magnet?
Sure. One scenario explored the impact of a global shift towards a flexitarian diet,
A flexitarian diet.
where people reduce their meat consumption and eat more plant-based foods.
Okay.
Which kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about
Right.
finding that balance
Yeah.
with animal-sourced foods.
Exactly.
And the results from Magnet were pretty encouraging.
Okay.
The simulation showed that this shift towards a more flexitarian diet could lead to significant reductions in greenhouse gas emissions,
Wow.
improved dietary diversity, and even potential health benefits.
So it's not just wishful thinking. Like Magnet is showing that these changes could actually have a real measurable impact.
It really could.
That's amazing. This deep dive has given me a whole new perspective on food systems.
I'm glad to hear that.
They're so much more complex and interconnected than I ever realized.
They really are, and this report does an incredible job of unraveling those complexities and providing a roadmap for a more sustainable, equitable, and healthy future of food.
Well said. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Rural Development Report 2021, what's the one key message you hope listeners take away from this?
I think the biggest takeaway is that food systems are not set in stone.
Right.
We have the power to change them, to make them work better for everyone.
Absolutely.
And that starts with understanding the challenges, exploring the possibilities, and making informed choices.
Well, this report gives us the knowledge and the tools to do just that. So for anyone listening who's feeling inspired to learn more, where can they find the full report?
It's available online, and I highly encourage everyone to check it out. It's packed with even more fascinating insights and data than we could possibly cover here.
And remember, this isn't just about, reading a report and then moving on.
Right.
It's about taking action,
Yeah.
making changes in our own lives,
Yeah.
and advocating for a better food future.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Every choice we make about food, from what we buy to how we cook to how much we waste, has an impact. Let's use that power wisely.
Well said. That's a wrap on our deep dive into the Rural Development Report 2021. We hope this has sparked your curiosity, given you some food for thought, and maybe even inspired you to take action.
And as always, we want to hear from you. What are your takeaways from this deep dive? What resonated with you the most? The conversation continues beyond this episode.
Let's keep exploring this vital topic together and work towards a more delicious and sustainable future for everyone.